Hello and welcome to the training video for the Everybody Dance Now robot dancing competition. Today I'm going to be showing you how to use Choreograph, which is the drag and drop programming interface for the Now humanoid robot. In particular, showing you how to animate a Now to dance. So when you first load Choreograph, you'll get this view here. And you'll notice we have lots of modules around the sides of the main workspace in the center, and some of these we don't need. So we're just going to get those out of the way. What I can do is close Robot Applications, and I'll find a robot view behind it, and this is going to be very important. I can also close Pose Library and Video Monitor, because they're not generally needed. And I can then enlarge my robot view. If I want to manipulate this robot view, I can drag, left click and drag to move it. I can right click and drag to rotate it. And if you have a scroll wheel, you can then zoom in and out to just see your virtual robot in its environment. One thing I'd like to quickly note though, is if you click on one of the robot's arms, you'll get this dialog. This dialog shows you all the joints on the robot that you can control. Notice that there's some blank space around here to the left. This is because the virtual robot we have here is not the same as the physical robot we will be using. So we need to make sure we're using the same robot so that we get the full anatomy of the robot. What I'm going to do is go to Edit and Preferences, select Virtual Robot, and under Robot Model, I want to make sure I'm selecting the H25 V50, which is the latest version, and hit OK. Then ask to say yes to restart the virtual robot. And you'll see I now get a red virtual robot. If I click on a limb, I have more controls available. This is very important. It just means your robot can move in more ways than the previous model. Now I have that set up, what I'm going to do is start getting ready to animate. As I mentioned, Choreograph is drag and drop, so it means we can drag boxes into the environment to animate. If I scroll down in the box libraries, I'm going to find a stand-up box, and I'm going to drag that in. I'm also going to scroll further down and find Timeline under Templates, and drag that in. These are the two boxes we're going to need. What I'm now going to do is drag a wire from the play here to the play on stand up, and another wire from the end of stand up, the top output, to the input of Timeline, then from the output of Timeline to the end. What this now says is when our program starts, stand the robot up, then if the robot successfully stood up, start the timeline, and the timeline is where we are going to write our dance. What I'm going to do is double click on the timeline box, and I will get this timeline view up, and this is where we are going to start doing our animation. You animate now using essentially a stop motion animation framework. You show now the individual freeze frames or poses of the motion you want it to do, and it will transition between those over the time frame you specify, which in turn create motion, and when you do string lots of these keyframes together, you create a full dance. So that's what we're going to do. I typically recommend the first pose of your animation should be the robot standing with its hands by its side, which is why we have the stand up block at the start of our timeline. What I'm going to do here is go to where this blue line is on my timeline, right click, the second from the bottom is Store Joints and Keyframe, and I'm going to select Whole Body for now. But notice that you can select to just animate the head, arms or legs, depending on what your motion wants to do. I'm going to select whole body in this case. This means I've just saved every joint in the robot's body. And you'll notice this created a grey box here. This grey box represents that pose. The timeline runs at 25 frames per second. So here at the 25 point means that it'll take 1 second for the robot to achieve this pose. I'm going to click later at 50 to be able to configure my next pose. What I'm going to do is I'm going to very simply have the robot raise its arm like so, and I do that by manipulating these sliders. So I've just moved my robot's hand to that position, and you'll notice it created a grey box there, which is the next keyframe. That represents this pose the robot is now in. I'm then going to click later in time again. This time I'm going to select the other arm, and I'm going to raise it also. There we are. I'm also going to pivot its arm out like that. So now the robot will try to achieve that pose. And you see it automatically created that next keyframe. What I'm now going to do is I can either hit the play button here on my timeline to just play through the motion we've just created, like this. And you'll see the robot did our animation. Or I can hit the green play button up here. You'll see the robot will reset. This is it standing itself back up. And then it played the timeline. Notice that when I select the arm, I have these coloured discs. These are basically rotators, so that I can manipulate that joint in here if I prefer. But I typically find the sliders are a little bit easier. It's very important to think through your motion well, so that you know where the robot's going. The relative spacing between these keyframes we've created change the rate at which the robot moves. So if I want that last arm to go up much faster, I drag it closer to the previous frame. And I'm going to sample that animation again. Notice the left arm of the robot went up much faster because of the relative spacing in our timeline. This is the basic procedure for animating now. You can control both arms as I've shown you, also the head and the legs. When you start playing with the legs, you start running into things like balance of the robot, which need to be taken into consideration. The virtual robot does not simulate gravity, so please be aware that an animation that looks interesting and stable on the virtual robot does not necessarily mean it'll work on a physical robot. The last thing I need to show you do is how to import music into your project. You'll notice under behavior layers on our timeline, we have keyframe 1 here. What this means is it says do what's ever inside this workspace here at keyframe 1, or time 0 essentially. So that's where we want our music to start. So what I'm going to do is find a play music box, which is under audio, sound, play sound, and I'm going to connect it up like so. If I then click on the spanner on play sound, I can import the file I need. What I can do is select the folder button, go to add, import files, and then find the music file I need. The best file should be a WAV file, .wav. This will play on the virtual robot and also play on the physical robot when that time comes. Once you have loaded your file, you just hit OK. And there we go. Now, when I play my project, the robot will do the animation and play that sound at the same time. It is best to crop your music down to the length of your dance before you begin, as large music files do take a long time to upload to the robot every time you run a retest. So cropping it down beforehand is usually a good idea. This is all the core content on how to animate now for the Everybody Dance Now competition. If you have any further questions, please contact us at The Brainery and we will do our best to help you. Thank you.